Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. In the final leg of his 5-nation tour, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made history in Namibia, becoming the first Indian leader to receive the country's highest civilian honour, the Order of the Most Ancient Welwitschia Mirabilis. The honour was conferred by Namibian President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah in Windhoek. It is the 27th international recognition that the Prime Minister has received since 2014. In his remarks, Prime Minister Modi called the award a symbol of the enduring India-Namibia friendship rooted in shared democratic values and mutual respect. He also reflected on the historic ties between the two nations and expressed confidence in the future of their development partnership. During their wide-ranging discussions, the two leaders explored ways to deepen bilateral cooperation. Prime Minister Modi thanked Namibia for its vital role in the Cheetah conservation project that helped reintroduce the species in India. The two countries also signed two key Memorandums of Understanding, one in the health sector and the other to boost entrepreneurship. The Prime Minister also addressed a joint session of the Namibian Parliament where he emphasized the shared commitment to democratic ideals and highlighted the people-centric nature of the India-Namibia relationship. The Prime Minister reiterated India's unwavering support for Africa's development, particularly Agenda 2063, the continent's strategic vision for inclusive growth. So to discuss the significance of these developments, from the honour bestowed on Prime Minister Modi to the growing strategic ties between India and Namibia, we are joined by two distinguished guests. So let me begin the program by introducing them to you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome on the program today Professor Ajay Kumar Dubey, Centre for African Studies, JNU. Professor, delighted to have you with us on this broadcast. It gives me immense pleasure also to welcome Ambassador Suresh Goel, former Ambassador. Ambassador, glad to have you with us on this broadcast as well. Professor, coming to you first, and before we begin talking about the significance of this visit of the Prime Minister to Namibia, considering it comes after a gap of 27 years, help us and our viewers understand the India-Namibia relations right from history to the contemporary times. So what we know is that India and Namibia share an old relationship of trust and friendship. India did support Namibia's independence struggle as well. How has this legacy that started with solidarity evolved into a modern day partnership based on mutual growth and cooperation?
India and Namibia, as you said, have historical relationship. When we were fighting against the apartheid regime in South Africa, the same regime was controlling Namibia at that point of time as well. So we had extended our full support to the freedom fighters in Namibia, SWAPO. We recognized SWAPO even before Namibia became independent. We extended all support to Sam Nujoma in his fight against internal colonialism that South Africans were perpetuating over there. And it is in this that we could establish a very close relationship with leadership of Namibia. That leadership was very pro-India, and it wanted to learn from Indian experience from then onwards. We opened the Indian mission immediately after Namibia became independent in a full-fledged way, and we had Namibian envoys in India. And we cooperated with them in agriculture sectors and many other sectors to begin with. Our relationship with Namibia is also important historically because we have now very close strategic partnership with South Africa. We also have very strategic and close relationship now with Angola, and Namibia is located between these two countries and the sea. And therefore, this is an important country with which we had tremendous goodwill, and we had not been able to reciprocate and in terms of providing a top-level political visit to Namibia. Prime Minister's initiative to have large number of political visits to African country to engage them, which they always complained about India, that there is not much visit from the top level political leadership in India, is part of that. And also we see that the historical and goodwill that we have is also important from rising India in terms of establishing a strong relationship for our growth requirement.
Certainly. Professor, will in fact touch upon how this visit of the Prime Minister to Namibia reflect on India's larger policies in dealing with Africa and engagements with various African countries in just a moment. Let me bring in Ambassador Goel's perspective. First, from the point of view of the significance of this visit, obviously because it came at the prime ministerial level after a gap of 27 years. And secondly, Ambassador, we've seen powerful symbolic moments during this visit of the Prime Minister. So I'll start with the honor, the highest civilian honor that was bestowed upon our Prime Minister. What is the broader diplomatic and strategic significance, according to you, of our Prime Minister receiving Namibia's highest civilian honor? He's the first Indian leader to have been conferred with that honor. How do you also see this gesture now adding greater value to India-Namibia friendship?
Tina, let me put it this way. When these honors are conferred on the visiting dignitaries, they're always a symbol of the deepening ties, the respect we have for each other, and they are a symbol of the strength that we see in each other for our own mutual working relationship. And therefore, the Prime Minister is quite right when he says that this honor having been conferred on him is an honor for India, because this is the recognition of what India means for Namibia. So always a great honor, always a great thing to happen. Increasing number of honors that Prime Minister Modi is getting, all very, very good, really. Let me come to the basics of, I know that we can have many points of basically significance in terms of display of this important, in terms of showcasing the image. But why is the relationship between India and Namibia important in the modern context? Professor Ajay Dubey has spoken a great deal about our historical, not in the sense of going back to 1,000 years. Even though I've been to Namibia on several occasions, and there are evidence when people had traveled to Namibia to even 1,000 years ago through South Africa and through the North of African continent that come down there. So there has been interaction at a people level, but in the modern context, if you remember, the Prime Minister Modi has been focusing on the global south. Everywhere when we go, whether it is BRICS or G20, it is global south, which is going to play a role on the global platform in terms of the geoeconomics, in terms of the geopolitics, in terms of really climate change conventions, because if the leadership or if the process remains only with the North, where they have own interest, then the global South is going to be left behind. And therefore, to carry the global South, and incidentally, I just want to add here, we may not really like the name of the non-aligned movement anymore, but India was in the forefront of the non-aligned movement and the decolonization. And the Namibians have not forgotten that. SWAPO was mentioned as anti-apartheid, but it is more really decolonization. Namibia was a country which became a symbol all over the world of India's stand for anti-apartheid movement. We used to support ANC and PSC through Namibia. When our mission opened in Namibia, our material support went through Namibia. It was a very important outpost for our support to African organizations. So we need to move from that to really translating global South into an effective player on the global scene for economic growth, economic development, transfer of technology, transfer of financing, and developing an equitable trading regime. And unfortunately, at the moment, the way things are, even though 10 years ago there was some hope of bringing this trade equity, economic equity to the world, I think we are slowly losing hope. And in that process, very important visit to carry the global South with us, particularly when we realize that there are competing interests from countries to our north, other countries who are trying to get their attention. So we have to be there now to be able to carry on the relationship in the larger global context also, besides bilateral.
Sure. How we can build momentum in further expanding the areas of cooperation is something that I'll get back to comments and perspective from Professor Dubey. But Ambassador, what we also know is that 2 MOUs were signed, one on health and the other on entrepreneurship. What kind of impact do these agreements have then on the ground? And how do you see them reflecting India's approach to development cooperation, not just within this country, but the larger continent?
Very important, I would say, because India has come to be associated with meeting with the global disasters internationally. Please do recall the support we provided to Namibia during the COVID times, when we sent vaccines to Namibia and many other countries in Latin America and Africa. So India becoming really the factory of pharmaceuticals. India was the first country besides the USA to come up with a vaccine in the international markets. So, and that too at a very reasonable price. We gave it away without charging, but it was something that people could afford to buy it then. Therefore, healthcare, cancer care, COVID, and entrepreneurship development is very important, because I think the key issue for Namibia now is not just basically buying things, doing trade, but to become an effective development partner. Namibians are ambitious. They want to develop their industrial base. They want to process their own minerals. At the moment, their revenue is from exporting these minerals.
Right.
Why shouldn't they be allowed to process them within the country? So entrepreneurship development develops that enterprise at the lowest root level of people, just like about small scale and medium industries, where they can become partner in the economic processes in the country. Yes.
Professor, understanding from the interventions that you made earlier and from what Ambassador is suggesting, this visit in many ways we can say marks an inflection point in India-Namibia relations, both in symbolic as well as strategic terms. So what now should be our next steps to ensure that this momentum that's been created continues in areas like trade, digital cooperation, also capacity building, something that the Prime Minister mentioned, areas like education and health?
Yes, I think these are very important areas, and India had been focusing in these areas in most of the African countries: capacity building, human resource development. And these 2 agreements that we had, the MOU that we had, are also part of that. Capacity building into the healthcare and also capacity building into the entrepreneurship development. But what is important that following Prime Minister visit, there are many other things that one needs to follow up. One is the critical mineral resources, the rare earth, in which Namibia is one of the richest country in Africa. And it has diamond, it has rare earths, it has uranium. So can we utilize our Prime Minister visit to Namibia to expand our economic cooperation in these areas? Second, that our total trade with Africa, which is around 100 billion, is confined only to 10 countries, which forms around 90% of India-Africa trade. Countries like Namibia, which has tremendous potential in many of these critical minerals and resources, we had not been focusing on. So it's time that we bring in other countries which are out of these 10 countries which form 90% of our trade with Africa. And third, as you said initially, the Prime Minister is saying that India has its own plan by 2047,
yes.
2047, it wants to become a Viksit Bharat. And similarly, the 2063 agenda that African Union has set for African country is something they want to achieve with cooperation of countries like India, which has tremendous goodwill and whose resources are important. It's a democratic country. Namibia is also a democratic country. And therefore, this democratic ties is going to help a lot in terms of promoting what is the agenda for Namibia.
Right.
So
Professor, before we proceed with how India can also align its Vision 2047 with Africa's strategy for 2063, something that I wanted to understand, this is one point that perhaps came up even when the two leaders of both countries met during the wide-ranging talks, and this was about exploring newer avenues of cooperation. So despite the political goodwill, despite the intent, the numbers look quite modest when we look at the trade and commercial relations. So what are the main hurdles, if I would like to try and understand from you? And now after this visit, how can both sides put in more efforts to boost economic and private sector engagement? Professor?
Yes, I think that's the trade figures are low. That's what the point I was also hinting at, that out of 100 billion, India, Africa has very small contribution into that. And the fact that there is tremendous scope to, at least in terms of value terms, expand our trade quite significantly, because they have very precious metals and resources which India can utilize now. With China controlling the supply of these minerals, India needs to find new resources, new countries where from it can resource directly. And Namibia is one of them with which we have direct cooperation. But with visit of Prime Minister, it not, as Ambassador Goyal said, it not only adds to Global South initiative, but also to get those resources that India very much needs and to promote this. Historically, our relationship were confined largely to South Africa in the gold and other areas, and with Angola in terms of the oil supply. But Namibia had been not focused so far. But with Prime Minister visiting over there, the diamonds, the rare resource, their rare earth, and critical minerals will become a new item, new areas for exploration and trading, which will increase the bilateral trade as well.
Certainly. Ambassador, coming now to the support for Agenda 2063, the Prime Minister did reiterate India's commitment to building capacity and unequivocal support for Africa's development agenda for 2063. How can we align our own development projects or perhaps credit lines with specific goals which are outlined in Agenda 2063, which include areas of infrastructure, digital innovation, or also for that matter, youth employment?
Tina, I have been in this business for more than 40 years now. Unfortunately, what we do is that when we develop our strategies for cooperation or the development partnership, we look at it in terms of really exclusive areas. That Namibia want this and we want this, and they don't ever match really. We need to develop a synergy where we can mutually benefit from those kind of cooperation projects. Now, I will give examples here. I was in Johannesburg in 2006 to 2010. No, 2002 to 2006. Okay. 2005, we began to negotiate with South Africa a fair trade agreement. And South Africa suggested that we should do it with SACU rather than just South Africa, because SACU was being formed and SACU would become a kind of an integrated body, bringing together all the South African countries, that is South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, and I'm forgetting one more, 4 countries, into this union. That union would provide a kind of a common platform rather than just one country to grow the bilateral trade. 2006. Today is 2025.
Yes.
More than 20 years, and the Prime Minister is still today talking about finalizing the FTA between India and SACU. I mean, come on, 20 years is a long time. So I think we should really focus on those areas where we can strengthen their trade mechanism, number one. Number two, Namibia is a very strong maritime nation. Namibia has very good maritime production, blue economy. We should focus on the blue economy with Namibia. If you look at the western coast of Namibia, it's a huge resource. Work together with them. And also, please remember that with the kind of uncertainties which exist in to the north of Africa through the Suez, Red Sea, etc., a lot of shipping is now taking place once again through the Cape of Good Hope. So that is one area where we can work together. I'm going off the accepted beat really, but we need to think of the areas where we can find commonality of interest between India and Namibia rather than exclusivity. Agriculture is another one. Developing processing base in Namibia. Developing industry in Namibia. Why can't we establish a university or IIT in Namibia? Many Namibians come to India under ITEC and the ICCI scholarship program to study in the Indian institutes. Let us form an IIT in Namibia, where people from the surrounding countries can come. Look, the huge potential. We have to really think out of the box.
Certainly, and we do see that efforts have been made even during this visit by the diplomatic delegation to expedite the discussions on the India-SACO PTA. At the same time, the Prime Minister also has offered India's support for quick impact development projects, something that, Ambassador, you mentioned in the areas of agriculture. It includes information technology as well, cyber security, healthcare, education, and so on. But what's interesting is that Namibia has also become the first country to now enter into a licensing agreement to adopt the UPI technology. Professor, how significant is that going to be? Today it's Namibia, tomorrow it may be several other countries in Africa, and it in a way reflects how India is willing to share different success stories, such as that of UPI, such as that of DPI, something that has worked for the Indian population, but that development now percolating and we are sharing with countries in Africa.
Yes, absolutely. The fact that we are sharing and Namibia has accepted, it also shows that there is a great potential for these kind of digital economy, these kind of digital transactions. And India is going to work in this area in many countries, in Africa and other developing countries. Also, the fact that you mentioned that the Namibia is, and our Ambassador Goel also said, that the kind of issues that we have in terms of negotiating with the regional blocs, now the buzzword is not the regional grouping, but now we have Africa Free Trade Zone. So entire Africa had now signed together to have a common tariff zone and common trading area. And India needs to work on that very significantly. Its headquarters is located in Ghana, where Prime Minister visited in this visit also. So I think India has to work strategically. South Africa is a very friendly country, but also for India, if you just see the historical side of it, it has a competitive relationship as well. Entire Southern Africa, where we want to expand our trade, is part of the South Africa a monopoly of its supply for manufacturers and household goods, where it doesn't want a country like India to come so aggressively and share the market where it has monopoly. So why we had not been making much progress in this area is understandable, and it's fair enough. They have their own interest. So, but some of these rare earth, critical minerals, are important for us, and I think we need to move in this area, and I don't think we have competition even from South Africa.
Perhaps the groundwork has been done through this visit, because in many ways we are seeing a more active, more confident approach that India has now adopted in dealing with countries in Africa. Ambassador, one critical aspect when it comes to India-Namibia relationship is the cheetah conservation project. It's often been highlighted as a very unique India-Namibia collaboration. But beyond the cheetah project, could wildlife conservation or a larger cooperation in the area of environment become a long-term area of joint leadership between India and Namibia, perhaps even with the global south?
Absolutely. I have found that countries in Africa, whether it is Kenya, um, uh, Masai is a great example of how
Masai
they
Mara.
develop their
Yes.
Masai Mara is a great example of how they develop their own wildlife resources for tourism and for overall conservation effect. Kenya, Tanzania, everywhere. I do feel, maybe I'm wrong, but I do feel that India and these countries in Africa, they look at wildlife conservation from different perspectives. We kind of separate the human population from the wildlife, etc. In African countries, the human population is very much a part of the development strategy. They live there, they breed the animals, and they basically understand the animals much better. And therefore, I think there are many lessons we can learn in terms of how to deal with our own wildlife conservation programs. And India and African countries, particularly Namibia, can work together really. I'll give you an example. In Namibia, when I was there, I had gone on a boat, and they're called the seal tours. And the seals become so friendly to the tourists. They jump over to the boats, they eat fish, go away, and no harm ever comes to them really. Nobody does anything. I think we should try and see how people and animals can live in a friendly or cohabit a friendly environment. Great scope for cooperation in that area.
Perhaps we could see further cooperation being expanded in the times to come. But Professor,
Yes.
The Prime Minister also put people of both countries at the heart of diplomacy. He said the people of both countries are the most strong pillar of our relationship with Namibia. So what more can be done in the times to come to bring the people of both countries more closer, especially the youth? How can it be done through education, through maybe culture or areas of innovation? There are several programs underway about which the ambassador did refer to, but to have more substantial outcomes to strengthen the India-Namibia ties?
I think what the Prime Minister announced in Ghana, we need to do something with Namibia also. We need to increase the slots for ITEC. We need to increase the fellowship for Namibian students to come and study here. We need to promote multi-stakeholders engagement, not just business, diplomats, but also civil society. Both countries are very democratic. They have uninterrupted democracy since independence, and in order to promote people-to-people relations, we have to promote this cultural relation, youth relation, by exchange of visits, inviting them, have a cultural center over there. I think there are several things which government will do once it has decided to engage Namibia in a serious way.
Okay, Ambassador, the closing comments from you perhaps on how to take this relationship forward. The momentum perhaps has been set, but the ball needs to go rolling for tangible outcomes when we say deepening India-Namibia ties, and in the larger picture, deepening India-Africa ties. What is the top priority in terms of India's approach, economically, strategically, diplomatically?
I think the details have been already discussed. Therefore, I will basically just say one overarching comment.
Yes.
I have served in two developing countries or least developed economies, or close to them. I've served in Africa. I've served in Southeast Asia, in Laos. India, during my time, was a highly respected country because India was partnership in their independence movement, in their movement for dignity, human dignity. That is what they're looking for, not just independence. In Laos, India was looked at as a guru, a spiritual guru. Namibia, India was looked as a beacon. We are losing that space now to another competitor. We must try and do something, and there is plenty to do. Make them partner, development partner, become partner in their own aspirations, encourage them, and so that we can get back to the space which we are slowly losing and could lose further unless we really wake up to this friendship.
Sure. With that message, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. What we've discussed by far in the program is that both India and Namibia, through this visit of the Prime Minister, which came at the Prime Ministerial level after a gap of 27 years. And interestingly, it was also the first state visit that the Namibian president hosted, because she's just taken over in March. She's assumed office. And this was the first state visit that she had also hosted. During this visit, the Prime Minister not just engaged with the Indian diaspora, he also held wide-ranging talks with the new president, the first female president of Namibia. He also addressed the Parliament of Namibia, and at the same time, he was conferred with the top civilian honor of the country. So all in all, what it suggests is that both countries have opened a new chapter in their historic ties. The road ahead also looks rich with potential for cooperation for people, as both our guests have also suggested, but also for the larger promise of a truly global South-led future. So let's hope that tangible outcomes emerge from this visit of the Prime Minister, and what we've discussed in terms of achieving, in terms of where this relationship can further elevate to, that happens in the next few years. The roadmap has been laid down. It's just that implementation needs to be done. With that, we'll have to wind up the conversation. Once again, a big thank you to both our guests, and thank you very much to you viewers as well for your time.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.